The pounding at my front door came like a shotgun blast. 3 hard knocks, then silence. Not the kind of silence you notice, but the kind that holds its breath and waits for you to move first. It was still dark outside. The clock on my nightstand read 5:02 a.m. Nobody knocks on your door at that hour unless something's gone terribly wrong. I got up slow, the ache in my knees reminding me what 58 feels like, and reached for the old baseball bat I kept beside the dresser. My house sat halfway up a ridge outside Richmond, quiet, too quiet since Grace died 3 months ago. The wind hissed through the pine trees, carrying the smell of rain. Another knock, sharper this time. "Who's there?" I called. "It's Marcus," came the voice, fast, low, shaking a little. "Don't open the door. Just listen." Marcus Hill, my neighbor. Mid-40s, white, used to wave from his porch, but never came this close. "What's going on?" I asked. Through the wood, he said, "Adam, whatever you do, don't leave your house today. Promise me that." I froze. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I can't explain. Not now. Just stay inside. Promise me." Then his footsteps retreated, quick and uneven, gravel crunching under his boots. By the time I pulled the curtain aside, his truck's taillights were already fading down the road. I stood there, bare feet on cold floorboards, trying to make sense of what just happened. The clock ticked loud enough to sound like judgment. I made coffee because that's what you do when you don't know what else to do. The old percolator hissed and sighed like an old friend. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the empty chair across from me, Grace's chair. "Don't leave your house," I whispered, repeating Marcus's words. Grace used to say the same thing on stormy nights. She'd light a candle and tell me to wait things out, said the world always looked worse through the rain. By 6:15, the sky was turning gray-blue. The ridge outside looked like the spine of a sleeping animal. I tried to shake off the unease. Maybe Marcus had a nightmare. Maybe he'd been drinking again, but there was something in his voice, a panic that didn't belong to a drunk man. I turned on the TV for company. Static first, then a commercial for car insurance, then local news. The anchor's voice was tight, uncertain. "We're following a developing story this morning. An explosion reported at Pantera Pharmaceuticals just outside downtown Richmond. Emergency crews are on scene. Details are limited, but witnesses describe a blast shortly before 7 a.m. I sat up straight. Grace had worked there 23 years in medical research before she retired. She said she was tired of the politics, but the truth was she'd been scared. I'd caught her shredding papers the week she left. When I asked why, she said, "It's better you don't know." Now my stomach turned cold. The footage showed smoke rising from a low building, one I'd driven by 100 times. Sirens wailed faintly through the broadcast. Less than an hour ago, Marcus had told me not to step outside. Now, a place tied to my wife was in flames. Coincidence has never been kind to me. At 7:35, the phone rang. Unknown number. I let it buzz twice before answering. "This is Coleman." "Mr. Coleman, this is Detective Harris, Richmond Police." The voice was calm but distant, like someone reading from a script. "We need to confirm your whereabouts this morning." I frowned. "I've been home since last night." "Why, your vehicle was seen near the Pantera facility around 6:45. Do you know anyone who might have access to it?" I looked through the window. My truck sat right where I left it, dew on the hood glinting in the morning light. "That's impossible," I said. "My keys are right here." "Sir," the detective continued, "we'd like you to stay inside until officers arrive to speak with you. For your safety." "For my safety," I repeated. "Or yours." But he'd already hung up. I stood there holding the phone, every nerve in my body awake. Grace's car had exploded on a highway 3 months ago. They'd said it was mechanical failure. I'd buried her believing that. I'd told myself the world didn't care enough about 2 aging nobodies to lie. Now I wasn't so sure. The coffee had gone cold. I poured it out, the dark swirl disappearing down the drain like time itself. I walked through the living room, past the framed photographs, wedding in '88 Christmas with our boy before the accident, Grace's graduation in her white lab coat. Life reduced to rectangles behind glass. Something caught my eye. The wedding photo. For the first time, I noticed faint handwriting along the bottom edge of the frame, almost hidden by the matting. I took it down and held it under the light. If something happens to me, trust no one. Her handwriting, Grace's. The room tilted. Outside, a siren rose and fell somewhere down the ridge, distant but closing in. I set the photo back carefully, afraid it might break under my shaking hands. Maybe Marcus wasn't warning me about the world outside. Maybe he was warning me about the world that had already found its way in. The phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unknown number. Only 5 words. They know you're still home. I stared at it, heart thudding. Through the front window, a black sedan rolled slowly past my driveway, tinted windows glinting in the half-light. I killed the TV, the lights. Everything that hummed or blinked. The house went dark and still. Grace's voice echoed in my head. Wait things out, Adam. Don't move until you understand what you're running from. But I understood one thing already. Whatever had killed her wasn't done. And for reasons I couldn't yet name, it had finally come knocking for me. I sank into the chair by the window, watching the sun break through the fog, thin and colorless. Funny, I murmured, how trouble always finds you, even when you're too old to chase it. The phone rang again at 8:02 a.m. Same unknown number, same chill crawling up my spine. I let it buzz once, twice, thinking maybe if I ignored it, the world outside would forget my name. But the ringing kept coming, steady, patient, like someone breathing on the other end of the line. Mr. Coleman, the voice said when I finally answered. Detective Harris, Richmond Police. He didn't sound angry, just tired, like a man who'd already decided what box to put me in. Detective, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You already called? Yes, sir, but there's been a development. We have clear footage of your vehicle entering the Pantera parking structure at 6:43 this morning. That's impossible, I said. My truck hasn't moved. You're certain? Positive. The keys are in my pocket. He hesitated just long enough for the silence to mean something. We also recovered personal items from the site, a security badge with your name, some paperwork from your wife's former department. Can you explain that? My throat went dry. Grace left that place 3 years ago. She still had active clearance. I could hear him shuffling papers, the sound of authority arranging its own facts. Detective, I said quietly, my wife's been dead 3 months. Maybe you should check your records before you accuse a widower of stealing his own truck. A long pause. Then, we'll be sending officers to verify your statement. Please remain inside. Click. The line went dead again, like it always does when truth starts to get inconvenient. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air. Outside, a siren rose somewhere downtown. The world kept spinning as if my name wasn't about to be dragged through the dirt. I tried calling Marcus, no answer. Tried again, straight to voicemail. Damn it, I muttered. Every instinct told me to get out, drive somewhere, anywhere. But his voice from before kept echoing, don't leave your house today. I pulled back the curtain. The black sedan was gone, but a silver SUV now sat halfway down the road, engine running, windows up. Not moving, not idling, it was watching. I stepped away from the window, heart thudding, slow and heavy. Grace had warned me once that the easiest way to erase a man is to let him vanish into his own story. I never knew what she meant until that moment. I walked to her study. I hadn't opened that room since the funeral. Dust floated like snow in a shaft of light. Her books still lined the shelves, immunology, molecular engineering, a Bible tucked between them like an apology. On her desk sat a locked drawer. I'd never had the key, but grief makes a man resourceful. I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were folders, employee IDs, lab notes, a flash drive. The badge was hers, but the expiration date read next month. I stared at it. Grace had been gone 3 months. So who had renewed her clearance? I plugged the flash drive into her old laptop. The screen flickered blue-gray, then filled with strings of numbers and words I didn't understand. Project Halo, access logs, Coleman, subject 2A. My own name sat there like a loaded gun. Before I could scroll further, the computer beeped battery warning, then a message box, remote connection active. Someone else was watching the same screen. I slammed the lid shut, heart hammering, and yanked the cord from the wall. Grace's handwriting stared back at me from a yellow sticky note taped to the desk. Trust no one. I laughed a dry sound. You got that right, baby. At 8:27 a.m., the power flickered. Once, twice. Then the house went quiet, the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock gone. Through the silence came the low crunch of gravel outside. I crept to the front window and peeked through the blinds. 2 men in dark coats stood at the edge of my yard, not uniforms private. One lifted his phone, pointed the camera toward the house, and took a photo. The other spoke into an earpiece, eyes fixed on my window. I stepped back into the shadowed hallway, breath shallow. They knew I was here. I thought about calling the detective back, telling him to check the pair of spooks parked in my driveway, but what if they were his? The walls felt closer, the air heavier. For the first time in a long while, I missed Grace, not as a memory, but as a shield, the way she used to step in front of problems before I even saw them coming. Maybe she'd been doing that all along, and I'd mistaken it for love. I grabbed my jacket from the hook, stuffed the flash drive in my pocket, and moved toward the back door. My plan was simple: slip out the rear fence, get to Marcus's house, demand answers. But when I looked through the kitchen window, a shadow crossed the yard, tall, deliberate. Someone was already back there. I ducked behind the counter, heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. The doorknob rattled, then stopped. A beat of silence. Then the unmistakable click of a phone camera. They were taking pictures, proof I was inside. I waited until the footsteps faded, then crawled to the living room and peeked through the blinds again. The SUV was gone. The men, too. Only the empty road remained, sunlight breaking through the clouds like nothing had happened. I slumped into the chair, shaking. If Grace was somehow tied to whatever this was, I had to know why. She'd hidden things, research papers, data drives, but she'd also hidden herself. Toward the end, she'd started sleeping in the guest room, saying she needed space to think. I thought it was grief or exhaustion. Now, I wasn't sure it wasn't guilt. I pulled her wedding ring from the chain around my neck and rolled it between my fingers. The engraving inside read, "To the truth. Whatever it costs." I used to think it was romantic. Now it sounded like a warning. The phone buzzed again, text message, same unknown number. "We just need the files, Adam. Don't make this harder. No punctuation, no greeting. Cold efficiency." I typed back before I could think. "Who are you?" Delivered. No reply. Then, outside, the camera flash again, quick white right at my window. I ducked instinctively, glass shivering, as if something brushed against it. I stayed crouched there, staring at my reflection in the dark glass. A tired man, unshaven, eyes wide, heart thundering in a body that had seen too much loss. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about what. And if the file in my pocket was what they wanted, then the only thing keeping me alive was the fact that they didn't yet have it. I tightened my grip on the flash drive, exhaled slow, and whispered, "All right, Grace. You wanted me to trust no one. Guess that includes the living." Outside, another click of a camera, closer this time. The game had officially begun. By the time the sun climbed over the ridge, my nerves were raw enough to hum. I hadn't moved from the chair since the last flash went off outside. The house felt like a stage after the audience left, quiet but heavy with the memory of noise. At 9:17 a.m., a knock came again. Softer this time. I raised the bat, crept toward the door, and called out, "Marcus, that you?" "Yeah, it's me. Open up, Adam. Quick." I hesitated. My eyes went to the window. No black sedans, no men in coats, just morning light spilling through the fog. I cracked the door. Marcus stood there, sweat on his brow, his shirt half tucked, holding a metal box the size of a shoebox. "Where the hell have you been?" I asked. He pushed inside before I could stop him, locking the door behind us. "Did anyone come by?" "You tell me. 2 suits with cameras were on my lawn half an hour ago." He cursed under his breath, set the box on the table, and said, "Then we don't have much time." The box was old dented corners, rust creeping up its hinges. A faded shipping label on top read, "Property of Pantera Research, Confidential." "Where'd you get this?" I asked. "From Grace's place," he said. "She asked me to clear out her things after the funeral. I found it hidden behind a loose panel in her closet. Didn't know what it was until this morning." He slid it toward me. "She meant for you to have it." My stomach nodded. "You went through my wife's house." "She told me to Adam." His voice dropped to a whisper. "In a letter, dated 2 days before she died." I stared at the box, unsure whether to thank him or throw him out. "Why bring it now?" I asked. "Because of that explosion. Because I think they're coming for whatever's inside." He opened the latches with trembling fingers. Inside lay a black USB drive marked with a silver emblem, something between a wing and a serpent, and a sealed envelope bearing my name. The envelope was yellowed edges soft, like it had been handled 100 times. On the front, in Grace's handwriting, "If he finds this, tell him the truth was never mine to keep." My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single page, half letter, half confession. "Adam. If you're reading this, it means what I feared has happened. I tried to protect you, but the truth doesn't belong to me anymore. What's coming isn't random, it's the cost of every lie I ever told you." That was all. No signature, no goodbye, just those few lines and the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the paper. I looked up at Marcus. "What do you know about this?" He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "You remember when I first moved here? Told you I used to work security." "Yeah." "I wasn't guarding a warehouse," he said quietly. "I was guarding Pantera's main lab. Grace worked there, same floor. She wasn't just some research tech, Adam. She had clearance higher than most of the doctors." I leaned forward. "You knew my wife. I knew of her. Everyone did. She was the one who questioned everything, who kept pushing for audits. People said she had evidence of human trial data being falsified." He paused. "When she disappeared from the building one night and resigned the next day, they said she'd taken files. Corporate security went crazy looking for them. So that's what this is." I tapped the box. He nodded. "Looks like she hid the proof." I exhaled, trying to steady the pounding in my head. "And you waited 3 months to tell me I thought it was over," Marcus said. "Until last week. Someone broke into my house, didn't take anything, just moved things around, like they were sending a message." He pointed to the USB. "That's when I knew I had to bring this here." We stared at the device like it might bite. "Do you have a computer?" he asked. "In her study." He followed me down the hall. Dust motes spun through the light like slow snow. I booted up Grace's old laptop, the one I'd nearly destroyed earlier. The screen flickered. Word came alive. When I inserted the USB, a black window opened. No desktop, no icons, just a single blinking line of text. Then green letters began to scroll. "Project Halo. Accessing archive security status active." The words burned across the screen like a verdict. Marcus stepped closer. "Holy hell," I whispered. "What is Project Halo?" He didn't answer. His face had gone pale. Lines of code flashed, replaced by folders named trial logs, blood index subjects, active, deceased. Each had a lock symbol beside it. I clicked one at random. The screen demanded a passcode. Marcus swallowed hard. "She told me once, the key is always in the ring. Does that mean anything to you?" I looked down at my hand. Grace's wedding ring hung from the chain around my neck. I slipped it off, turning it under the light. On the inside curve, so small I'd never noticed, was a string of engraved numbers. I typed them in. The lock icon vanished. The folder opened to a series of videos, grainy lab footage time-stamped years apart. Figures in white coats, medical tables, the sound of machines. The first clip loaded automatically. A woman's voice, calm and precise. Subject 2A shows increased regenerative response following serum exposure. Emotional cognition remains intact. Marcus whispered 2A. "That's you, Adam." I froze. The video shifted. A patient lay under harsh light, bandaged chest wires running from his arms. His face was blurred, but the body shape, the old scar across the shoulder, it could have been mine. I stopped. The playback slammed the laptop shut. "This is bullshit," I said, voice shaking. Grace wouldn't do that to me." Marcus said nothing. His silence was answer enough. I paced the room, fists tight. "You're telling me my wife experimented on me? That's insane." "Maybe she was trying to save you," he said softly. "She told a nurse once that you had a heart condition, said the trials could reverse tissue damage. Maybe she thought she could fix you before anyone found out." I wanted to yell, to hit something, but all I could do was stare at the laptop like it might wake her ghost. "She never told me," I whispered. "Not once." Marcus rested a hand on my shoulder. "Whatever this is, Adam, it didn't end with her. That's why they're back. They think the data's still alive, and they're right." We stood in silence. The only sound was the hum of the hard drive spinning inside the machine, like a heartbeat growing faster. Then a message flashed across the screen, white letters on black: "Remote connection detected. Location trace in progress." Marcus cursed. "They've found us." I yanked the USB out and the screen went dark. Outside, the distant wail of sirens began again, closer this time. Marcus grabbed the box, shoving it back into my hands. "Whatever happens, keep this safe. It's all she died for." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the window, flooding the room with white. We ducked down. "Who is that?" I whispered. Marcus looked at me, eyes wide, breath trembling. "Not the police." The front gate creaked open. Footsteps on gravel. I clutched the USB in my fist, feeling its sharp edges bite into my skin. On the laptop, even with the drive removed, one final word blinked faintly on the dark screen, like a warning left behind: active. The house smelled of metal and smoke after the laptop shut down, as if the machine itself had burned from what it showed me. Marcus stood by the window, watching the headlights fade down the road. When he turned back, his face looked older. Guilt settled deep in the lines around his mouth. "Adam," he said quietly, "we need to talk about Grace." Those words landed like stones. I sat down at the table, the USB still warm in my hand. Talk about what? How she spent half her life lying to me. Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked around the room as if the walls themselves might be listening, then lowered his voice. "I knew her before you did." I stared. "The hell you talking about?" "Not personally," he said. "Back when I worked security for Pantera in Seattle, she was already there. They called her the North Star, the one scientist who still had a conscience. When the company relocated its main lab to Virginia, she followed, said she wanted to keep an eye on the research." My stomach tightened. "She told me she moved east to be closer to her mother." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's what she wanted you to believe. The truth is, she was trying to keep you off their radar. Someone inside Pantera found out about the connection between her work and your medical records. She thought if she kept you out of sight, they'd forget." He looked down, ashamed. "She saved my job once. I caught a technician altering patient data, real human trials, not simulations. When I filed a report, corporate legal tried to pin it on me. Grace stepped in. She pulled the footage from security backups and sent it to an independent ethics board. They cleared my name, but she took the heat for it. After that, she was marked." I rubbed my temples. "And you never told me any of this. You lived next door for 3 damn years." "She made me promise," he said. "She said if anything ever happened to her, I was to stay close, make sure you were safe." I let out a rough laugh. Safe. That's a hell of a word for what's happening right now. Outside, the sky had darkened again, though it was still morning, the kind of light that made everything look like an old photograph. Marcus pulled the USB closer. "There's more in here. I didn't show you everything." I hesitated. "You mean there's worse?" "Different," he said. "Grace left a folder hidden inside the drive. It's encrypted under a dummy system. Took me all night to find it." He reconnected the USB this time using a separate offline laptop he'd brought. The screen glowed to life with a single folder labeled Private, Grace.c. He clicked it open. There were video files, each time-stamped months apart. The newest one marked March 8th, 2023, 2 days before she died. I felt something heavy lodge in my throat. Play it. Static first, then Grace's face filled the screen. No lab coat, no makeup, just her sitting in a dim room lit by a single lamp. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "If you're seeing this, Adam," she began, voice trembling, "then I failed to protect you. I lied about my work, about everything." My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. "They told me you were just a candidate." She continued, a name on a file for post-treatment observation. "I didn't know you were part of the original study until I saw your chart in the archives. By then it was too late." She looked off-screen as if someone had walked by, then back to the camera. "I tried to quit. They said if I left they'd come after you. That's why I agreed to transfer back to Virginia so I could keep them away from you. But every test, every serum formula I designed was tied to your blood. You weren't just my husband, Adam. You were the control sample they'd been searching for since the beginning." The room around me blurred. My pulse thundered in my ears. Grace pressed her hands together in the video, whispering something I could barely hear. Marcus leaned in to adjust the volume. "If you're seeing this," she said, "it means they've activated the project again. You need to find Marcus Hill. He knows where I hid the rest. And Adam, I'm sorry. They were never after me. They were after you." The screen froze on her face, eyes full of something between terror and love, before cutting to black. I just sat there staring. The silence in the room felt alive. Marcus said quietly, "She knew this day would come." I looked at him. "You're telling me I'm part of some goddamn science experiment, that I've been living under surveillance for decades?" He nodded once. "It started before either of us met her. Pantera ran a classified genetic immunity program back in the 90s. They were testing viral resistance, how certain bloodlines could fight disease naturally. Grace discovered your DNA matched the prototype markers. She spent the rest of her career trying to hide that fact." I laughed bitterly. "Hide it from who?" "From everyone," Marcus said. "Government, military, corporate, anyone who'd pay to weaponize it." I looked back at the frozen image of Grace on the screen. Her face looked both familiar and alien, like I was seeing her for the first time. "She kept this from me," I said. "All these years." "She wasn't protecting herself," Marcus said. "She was protecting you. The day she died, she called me, said she'd finally found a way to end it. The explosion today, that's not an accident, Adam. That's them erasing the trail she left behind." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the world tilt. I thought losing her was the worst thing that could happen to me. Turns out it was just the opening act. Marcus closed the laptop. "We need to move. They'll trace that USB again." But I didn't move. I just kept thinking about Grace, the nights she'd pace the hallway at 3 a.m., whispering into her phone, the locked cabinet in the guest room. The time I caught her crying while watching the news about a medical incident at Pantera. She'd said it was nothing, just an old colleague. Every memory I'd buried now glowed with new meaning, ugly and sharp. I whispered, "She knew this would destroy us." Marcus looked at me. "She hoped it would set you free." The words hit hard. Freedom wasn't something I'd felt in years. Not since the stroke, the layoffs, the funerals. Maybe not ever. I stood slowly, feeling older than I had that morning. "If she left proof of what they did, we find it. All of it." Marcus nodded. "Then we expose them." Outside, thunder rolled low across the valley. The first drops of rain hit the roof, soft, uncertain, like footsteps from somewhere far away. I unplugged the USB, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and whispered to the empty air, "You hear that, Grace? I'm listening now." Lightning flashed, illuminating her face one last time on the dark screen. Then the power went out. Rain was coming down in thin, nervous lines when Marcus and I drove to his place on the edge of town. He said his home lab setup would be safer than mine, off the grid. No smart tech, no eyes in the walls. The air smelled of iron and pine, that scent the earth gives off before a storm decides what kind of trouble it wants to bring. I hadn't spoken much since we left my house. My hands kept finding the chain around my neck, fingers rubbing the spot where Grace's ring used to hang before I'd used it as a passcode. Funny how love can open the wrong doors. Marcus's garage was half workshop, half bunker. Metal shelves lined the walls, old computers, microscopes, boxes of lab glassware. He flicked a switch and a generator hummed to life, washing the room in dim yellow light. "Sit," he said. "Let's see what she left inside that drive." He plugged the USB into a desktop that looked older than I was. The screen came alive with the same black interface, Project Halo, active. He navigated to a folder marked Genetic Data, 2A. 2A, I said quietly. "That's me again." He nodded. "Looks that way. A set of files loaded blood analyses, organ imaging, medical notes, all labeled Coleman Adam. Sample integrity, 98.6%. Marcus scrolled, his eyes narrowing. "Jesus." "What?" He turned the screen toward me. "Your DNA profile. It's off. There are markers here that don't exist in standard human sequences. See this pattern?" He pointed to a string of letters and numbers. "That's gene splicing. Someone modified this." My throat tightened. Modified? How? When he clicked into another file, Trial 2A, Cardiovascular Regeneration Phase 3. Notes scrolled by in Grace's handwriting. Subject remains stable. Cellular recovery at 11.4%. Cardiac rhythm normalized. Proceeding with serum adjustment, batch 6. I read it twice before I understood. "Serum adjustment," I whispered. She was giving me something. Marcus looked at me carefully. "You said you had a heart condition, right? When was your last episode?" 5 years ago, I said. Doctors called it a minor infarction. Grace said she knew a better treatment. She started giving me vitamins, said they were for cholesterol. He nodded slowly. "They weren't vitamins. She was testing her regenerative serum on you." I backed away from the desk as if the words themselves were toxic. "No," I said. "Grace wouldn't use me like that." Marcus sighed. "Adam, look at the data. You're walking proof it worked. These notes show you had 70% blockage in your arteries before treatment. 2 months later, 0. That doesn't happen naturally." I pressed my hands to my face. The memory hit like a hammer. Grace handing me a glass of orange juice every morning, saying, "Don't forget your supplements." I'd laughed, told her she was treating me like one of her lab rats. She just smiled, said, "Someone's got to keep you alive, old man." My voice broke. "She cured me without telling me. She probably thought you'd never agree," Marcus said. And she wasn't wrong. I sank into a chair, staring at the floor. The rain outside grew heavier, hammering against the tin roof like impatient fingers. "Grace wasn't just protecting you," Marcus said softly. "She was trying to finish what she started. Project Halo was designed to create genetic resilience, people who could regenerate damaged tissue, resist disease. She used your blood as the baseline. The serum worked, but it flagged her files. Once Pantera realized she'd used an unauthorized subject, they moved to shut her down." I looked up at him, my voice barely a whisper. "That's why they killed her." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I stood pacing the small space. "So I'm some kind of lab rat with a second-hand heart." "No," Marcus said. "You're the only success story they ever had." That didn't make me feel any better. I went to the counter, found a bottle sitting there, one of Grace's old prescriptions I'd brought from the house without thinking. Small, white, unmarked except for a faded code. I turned it over in my hand. "She said these were just vitamins," I muttered. Marcus came closer, reading the label. "Batch 6. That's the same serum line from the file. She must have kept samples here." The room tilted around me. My chest felt tight, not from sickness but from fury. "So she experimented on me, then spent the rest of her life lying about it. You call that love?" "She called it survival," Marcus said quietly. "You were dying, Adam. She thought she could save you. She just didn't tell you the cost." I clenched the bottle in my fist. "You cured me just to kill me later, didn't you?" I roared again, the sound tearing through my throat. The echo bounced off the walls, harsh and human. Marcus didn't move. He just let me shout, let me break. When it was over, I slumped against the counter, chest heaving. She thought she was saving you, he said quietly. But she also knew they'd never let you live once they found out what you are. What I am, I shot him a glare. He met it steadily. You're proof. Proof their experiment worked. As long as you're breathing, the story stays alive. That's why they came back for you. I looked at the shattered pills on the floor, the white dust mixing with oil and dirt. Then maybe I should have died with her. Marcus shook his head. Grace didn't die to end your life, Adam. She died to give it back to you. You think that was an accident? She wanted you to survive to finish what she started. His words hung there like smoke. Somewhere outside, thunder cracked so loud it shook the windows. The power flickered again. Marcus went to check the generator. I stayed where I was, staring at the mess on the floor. Every pill, every secret, every lie, pieces of a life I thought I understood. When I finally looked up, my reflection in the window startled me. My eyes looked different, clearer, sharper, almost luminous under the dim light. For a fleeting moment, I didn't recognize the man staring back. The storm outside roared like it knew something I didn't. And for the first time since Grace died, I realized the truth she'd been trying to tell me all along. I wasn't sick anymore. I was something else. By the time Marcus's generator sputtered out, the storm outside had turned mean. Rain hit the tin roof like fists, and thunder rolled close enough to shake dust from the rafters. That's when the red and blue lights bled through the slats in the garage door. Adam Coleman, a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. This is the Richmond Police Department. Step outside with your hands where we can see them. Marcus froze mid-step. How the hell did they traced the USB, I said quietly. Grace warned us. Another voice, harsher this time. Mr. Coleman, you are under investigation for acts related to biological terrorism under federal statute. Terrorism, I repeated, half laughing, half choking. They're calling me a terrorist now. Marcus peeked through a side window. 4 cars, maybe 5, and 1 unmarked black SUV. That's not just local PD, Adam, that's federal. I grabbed the USB and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Then we need to go, now. Marcus killed the lights. The two of us moved through the dark like ghosts past rows of dusty tools and an old snowblower. The back door opened into a narrow service alley that led toward the woods. Stay low, he whispered. We slipped out just as the garage door burst open behind us. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Police. Stop. We didn't. The mud swallowed our shoes as we ran through the rain, hearts pounding, lungs burning. The woods behind Marcus's place sloped downward toward the river. Every flash of lightning lit the branches white for a heartbeat, like camera flashes from the sky. By the time we reached the creek, both of us were soaked. Marcus leaned against a fallen log, gasping. Where are we going? Somewhere Grace would trust, I said, thinking fast. Someone who knows her work. He looked up. Helen Porter. The name hit me like a pulse of light in the dark. Helen, Grace's old research partner from Seattle. They'd lost touch when we moved to Virginia, or so I'd believed. Marcus nodded. She's at the university hospital now, faculty housing off Riverbend Road. You think she'd help? She was Grace's best friend, I said. If anyone knows what's left of this mess, it's her. We followed the creek until we hit the road. My car was useless. It had been flagged. So we took Marcus's old pickup, half rust and prayer, parked under a bridge 2 miles away. He drove while I sat silent, watching the road cut through sheets of rain. Every so often I'd catch my reflection in the window, hollow eyes, wet gray hair stuck to my forehead. I looked like a man halfway between alive and gone. It took us an hour to reach Helen's house. The lights were on inside, soft and yellow, like the world hadn't turned upside down yet. Marcus stayed by the truck while I went to the door. I knocked once. The door cracked open an inch. A woman's voice, steady, cautious. Who is it? It's Adam Coleman, I said. Grace's husband. A pause. Then the door opened wider. Helen Porter looked older than I remembered, silver hair pulled into a bun, reading glasses still perched on her nose. She stared at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "She said you might come." Those words stopped me cold. "She left something here for you," Helen said. Come in before someone sees. Inside the house smelled of lavender and old paper. Books were stacked on every surface: biology, chemistry, theology. The kind of home where science and faith had been wrestling for years. She led me into her study where a wood stove burned low. On the desk sat an envelope sealed in wax beside a thumb drive twin to the one in my pocket. Helen's eyes were tired. Grace sent it to me the week she died. Told me to give it to you only if certain people started disappearing. Marcus stepped in dripping rainwater onto the rug. They've already started. Helen nodded grimly. Then it's time. She pushed the envelope toward me. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a short letter written in Grace's elegant, deliberate script. Adam, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I'm gone, it means they've finally come for the rest of us. They won't stop with me. Everyone who ever touched Project Halo is on their list. You included. I know you hate secrets, but everything I did, every lie, every dose was to buy you time. You needed to live long enough to choose your own truth. If you ever stop loving me for what I've done, I'll understand. I read that last line twice before it sank in. If you ever stop loving me for what I've done, I'll understand. Marcus turned away, giving me privacy, but Helen stayed quiet watching. She knew what she was doing, Helen said softly. Grace wasn't crazy, Adam. She was terrified. The board at Pantera planned to eliminate every living subject once the data went public. She tried to warn them, but when they refused, she made sure the evidence couldn't be buried. By hiding it in me, I said bitterly. Helen didn't argue. She believed your blood was the key. She told me you carried a natural mutation that made her research possible. That's why she loved you, Adam, not just as her husband, but as proof that hope was real. I let out a harsh laugh. Hope, is that what they call experimenting on your spouse now? Helen stepped closer. She wasn't experimenting. She was fighting time. You were dying and she found a way to stop it. The only way. I wanted to argue, to scream, to hate her, but every cell in my body pulsed with the truth I couldn't ignore. Grace had saved me. She'd stolen years from death and given them to me. The problem was, she hadn't lived long enough to explain the price. Marcus cleared his throat. We should move soon. That letter's a confession. If they find it, they'll twist it to fit their story. Helen nodded and reached into her desk drawer. She handed me another item, an old-style flash drive with a red stripe across it. This one isn't just data, she said. It's her testimony. Grace recorded everything. Names, dates, the people behind the program. She trusted me to keep it safe. Now it's yours. I took it, feeling its weight like a heartbeat in my hand. What do I do with it? I asked. Make her truth known, Helen said, or destroy it. Either way, make it yours. For a long moment, no one spoke. The rain outside softened, tapering to a whisper. I looked down at Grace's letter one last time, tracing her handwriting with my thumb. If you ever stop loving me for what I've done, I'll understand. But the truth was, I couldn't stop, even if I tried. Marcus opened the blinds a crack. 2 cars rolled past on the street, slow, deliberate, their headlights cutting through the fog. They've found us again, he said. Helen blew out the lamp. Then go through the back. There's a service road behind the hill. Follow it to the old hospital wing. They won't think to search there. I slipped the letter into my jacket next to the USB. Grace's words burned against my chest like an ember that refused to die. We stepped into the night. The rain had stopped, but thunder still murmured over the valley, low and constant, like the world breathing before another storm. As we ran, I whispered into the dark Grace, whatever comes next, I'll make them hear your name. The road to the old Pantera site had been closed for years, but Marcus knew the back routes, the ones maintenance crews used before the plant was condemned. The forest around it was skeletal, stripped bare by wind and neglect. A chain-link fence leaned half-collapsed under ivy and rust. On the other side, half buried in the hill, the bunker waited, an open mouth swallowing the mist. This is where she worked after they moved the Virginia trials underground, Marcus said, flashlight trembling in his hand. She must have used her clearance to come back here. I stared at the heavy steel door. Grace's name had once been stenciled there, but the paint had peeled to nothing. We cut through the fence, slipped inside. The air was cold or heavy with the smell of old electricity and chemical dust. My footsteps echoed down the concrete hall, each one landing like a heartbeat. Every wall bore warning signs: biohazard, authorized personnel only. Every step forward felt like walking into her memory. Marcus found a panel half hidden behind a fallen cabinet. She would have used a security bypass here, he muttered. He pried it open, rewired 2 loose cables, and the door hissed to life with a low, mechanical groan. The vault inside was nothing like I'd imagined. Not sterile or futuristic, just quiet. Abandoned workstations, shattered glass file drawers half open. A faint hum came from a generator somewhere below, and there on a central table sat a familiar black laptop. Grace's. My throat tightened. "Are you sure it's safe?" Marcus asked. "No," I said, walking toward it, "but she wanted me to find this." The machine powered up with a pulse of blue light. A file directory appeared labeled Personal Archive, G. Coleman. I clicked one folder at random. It opened to documents, emails, logs, scanned memos. One line caught my eye: Subject Ethical Breach Report, Project Halo. Recipient Internal Oversight Board. Author Grace Coleman. Marcus leaned over my shoulder. She wasn't covering it up. She was exposing them. I scrolled further. The next entry read, "If anything happens to me, the attached files prove Pantera falsified results and concealed patient fatalities. The board must know before they shut us down." Grace hadn't been a traitor. She'd been a whistleblower, and they'd silenced her for it. My eyes burned. I hadn't cried since the funeral, not even when they lowered her into the ground. But this broke something open. Marcus whispered, "Adam, look at this." He clicked a video file named Last Recording. The screen filled with static, then with Grace's face, younger, worn, but determined. Behind her was this very vault. "If anyone finds this," she began, "I need you to know I didn't betray anyone. I'm documenting everything. The trials, the falsified data, the deaths they called unavoidable outcomes." She turned slightly, glancing toward the camera as if expecting someone. "They want to destroy the subjects, not because they're dangerous, but because they're proof. Proof that human immunity can evolve naturally. They can't control that, so they'll erase it." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steel. "I have one chance to send this evidence to the oversight board before they shut the system down. If I fail, whoever finds this, please finish it for me." The screen flickered. Then another clip began, automatically time-stamped 1 week later. It showed a hospital room, and me. I was hooked up to monitors, pale, motionless. My chest rose and fell under a tangle of tubes. Grace sat beside me, holding my hand. The camera angle was from her laptop. She must have recorded it in secret. She brushed a strand of hair from my forehead, her face red from crying. "I had to choose between your life and the truth," she whispered to the man who couldn't hear her. "And I chose you." Then she bent down and kissed my hand. "Forgive me." The screen froze on that image, her lips against my skin, tears glinting under fluorescent light. I reached out, touching the laptop as if I could touch her through it. My hand trembled. "She didn't betray me," I said, voice breaking. "She betrayed them." Marcus stood silent beside me. The weight of it all, the love, the lies, the sacrifice hit like a tidal wave. Every argument we'd ever had, every secret look she'd given me, suddenly made sense. She'd been fighting 2 wars, one for truth and one for my life, and she'd lost both. I closed the laptop gently, as if tucking her to sleep. For a moment the silence was so deep I could hear my own pulse. Then from far above came a low, rhythmic thump, faint at first, then louder. Marcus's head snapped up. You hear that, the sound built until the walls themselves seemed to vibrate, deep, steady, mechanical. Thump, 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 a helicopter. We froze. Marcus ran to the narrow window near the ceiling, pushed aside the grime. Through the slant of rain, red lights swept across the treetops. "They found us," he said. "They're circling." I looked down at the USB in my jacket pocket, the same data they'd killed Grace to hide. "We can't let them take this," I said. Marcus nodded. "Then we move. There's an escape shaft on the east side. Maintenance tunnel connects to the riverbank." The thumping grew louder, closer, shaking dust from the ceiling. I looked back once at the darkened laptop, the frozen image of Grace and me still faint on the screen. Her hand over mine. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "You bought me time. Now I'll buy the truth." Marcus pulled me toward the tunnel hatch. The sirens outside grew sharper, mingled with shouts, orders through megaphones, boots pounding on metal. As we climbed down the ladder, floodlights cut through the small window, flooding the vault in harsh white. But before I descended fully, I looked up one last time. The room she'd died trying to protect glowed under that light, cold, clinical, yet sacred in its own way. Then the sound hit like thunder, rotor blades slicing the air, the roar of engines descending. "They're here!" Marcus shouted. I dropped into the dark. We crawled through the maintenance shaft for what felt like hours, our hands and knees scraping against damp steel. The tunnel sloped downward, the air thick with mold and iron, until finally the roar of the helicopter faded into the distance. When we reached the end, Marcus kicked open a rusted grate, and we stumbled out into the open night beside the river. The rain had eased to a mist. The city glowed faintly on the horizon like a dying ember. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, breathing hard, soaked, shaking. Then Marcus said quietly, "They'll search the vault first. We've got maybe 15 minutes before they sweep this area." I nodded, still clutching the laptop we'd taken from Grace's vault. We used the time to finish what she started. We took shelter under the bridge. Marcus set the laptop on a dry slab of concrete, connecting a portable power pack he'd carried in his backpack. The screen flickered to life, the Pantera emblem flashing once before revealing Grace's encrypted interface. "Can you unlock it?" I asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. His hands hovered above the keyboard, trembling slightly. Then he sighed. "There's something I need to tell you before we go any further." I frowned. "Now?" He nodded. "Yeah. Now. Because once we hit this system, there's no going back." The rain hissed softly against the bridge above us. "I wasn't just some random neighbor," Marcus said. "When I moved next door to you, it wasn't by accident. I was sent there to watch Grace." The words hit like a fist to the gut. I took a step back. "What did you just say?" He looked up, eyes hollow. "I worked for Pantera Security. After Grace left Seattle, they hired me to track her. Said she'd stolen proprietary research. My job was to monitor her movements, report any contact with former staff. That's how I ended up in Richmond, right next door." My voice came out low, dangerous. "So you were spying on us, on her, on me?" "Yes." His voice cracked. At first, I stared at him, fists clenching. "Why the hell should I believe anything you say? Because she saved me, Adam." He looked down, rain dripping from his chin. "When they found out I was asking too many questions, they sent a cleanup team to retire me. Grace got wind of it. She called me, told me to get out before dawn. Left a note in my mailbox with an address, the lab vault we just came from. She said, 'If you ever want to be free, don't look for me, look for the truth.' That's why I came to you after she died. Not because they told me to, but because she did." I stared at him for a long time, the anger boiling, then settling into something heavier, understanding. All those months I'd blamed Grace for her secrets, her distance, her lies. And here was the cruel twist. Those very silences were what had kept me alive. I sat down beside the laptop, my knees aching. She protected both of us. Marcus nodded, even when we didn't deserve it. We sat there in silence, the river murmuring beside us. The glow from the screen threw pale light across our faces, making us look like ghosts of our former selves. I thought about the years I'd spent resenting her, the nights she wouldn't tell me what kept her awake, the arguments about money, the loneliness of loving someone who never fully let you in. And yet all that time she'd been carrying the weight of something I couldn't imagine. Grace used to say silence was her shield, I murmured. I thought it was an excuse, but now I get it. If she'd talked, they would have killed us both. Marcus didn't respond, just gave a small nod as if he'd come to the same conclusion long ago. The laptop pinged softly. A login screen appeared. Username G. Coleman. Below it, a blinking message. Welcome, Adam. Your access has been authorized. I froze. How? She must have programmed it, Marcus said. She knew you'd come here. The system loaded a new screen, sleek and simple. No folders, no files this time. Just two options in the center, glowing faintly against the dark background. Erase. Destroy all data and evidence. Remove all records of Project Halo. Reveal. Transmit all classified documents to global oversight channels. The choice was as clear as it was cruel. Marcus exhaled slowly. She left this decision to you. I stared at the screen, my reflection warped across the glass. In it, I saw every version of myself, the husband, the patient, the fool, the survivor. She said the truth would set us free, I whispered. But she also said the truth could kill us. Marcus crouched beside me. If you erase it, you walk away clean. They'll stop hunting you. No one will ever know what she did. And if I reveal it, then everyone knows. The program, the deaths, the lies, all of it. But once you hit that button, they'll come for you harder than ever. You'll be public enemy number one. My chest tightened. She saved my life, Marcus. I owe her the truth. Or maybe he said gently, you owe her peace. I looked at the glowing words again. Erase and reveal, two choices, two versions of the same love story. Grace had carried both her guilt and her hope into this one decision. She'd trusted me to finish it, knowing whichever path I chose, it would define everything she stood for. The river whispered beside us, steady and cold. I thought of her last letter. If you ever stop loving me for what I've done, I'll understand. Maybe this was what she meant, that love wasn't about holding on, but about letting go the right way. I reached toward the keyboard, hand trembling. She once told me, truth without mercy is just another kind of cruelty. Marcus looked at me, and mercy without truth, I met his eyes. That's just forgetting. For a long moment I hovered there between erasing her and revealing her, between peace and justice, between the man I'd been and the one she died to make me. Then a gust of wind swept through the tunnel entrance, carrying the distant thrum of helicopters again. They were closing in. The screen blinked impatiently, the options pulsing like two beating hearts. Marcus whispered, Adam, we're out of time. I stared at the laptop, Grace's initials flickering faintly in the corner of the screen, GC, and felt her presence in the hum of the river, in the echo of my heartbeat, in the impossible weight of what she'd left me to do. I took a deep breath, whispered, this is for you, and pressed my palm against the touchpad. The system beeped once, awaiting confirmation. Outside, the sound of rotor blades grew louder, the night trembling with their approach. The helicopter's blades thumped closer, each rotation pounding through my chest like a second heartbeat. The air beneath the bridge vibrated with tension, metal creaking, wind cutting time, shrinking. On the laptop screen, the two choices still glowed in the dark. Erase silence forever. Reveal. Let the world see. Marcus's hand hovered over his pistol, his face ghost white in the screen's glow. Adam, he said quietly. Whatever you decide, I'll back you. But once you hit that button, there's no undoing it. I nodded, staring at the words until they blurred. Grace's face flashed in my mind, her smile, her silence, the way she always said truth had a heartbeat of its own. I took a deep breath. She didn't die to be forgotten. Then I pressed reveal. A low hum filled the air. The screen flickered, showing a countdown. Transmission initiated. Global encryption sequence. 10, 9, 8. Outside headlights slashed through the trees. They're here, Marcus shouted. The sound of boots hitting wet ground echoed like gunfire. Voices barked commands through bullhorns. Secure the perimeter. No one leaves alive. Marcus pulled me to my feet. We've got to hold them off until that upload finishes. We ran toward the tunnel entrance, the laptop still running on the portable pack. Rain and mud smeared the concrete, turning every step into a fight. The door at the far end burst open, figures in tactical gear flooding the passage with flashlights and rifles. Marcus spun, fired a warning shot down the corridor. Go, Adam. Keep that thing online, Marcus. Go. I sprinted back toward the river outlet, laptop under my arm, while the sound of gunfire exploded behind me. The air filled with smoke and echoes. I could hear Marcus shouting, "Come on, you bastards!" The countdown ticked lower in my mind. I reached a maintenance room halfway down the tunnel, slammed the door, and braced it with a metal rod. The laptop screen glowed faintly in the dark progress bar, inching forward. Upload 82%. Outside the gunfire stopped, then silence. A sick, heavy silence. "Marcus," I called. No answer. Then faintly from far down the corridor came his voice, hoarse, defiant. "Finish it. Adam, make her proud." I clenched my jaw, tears mixing with sweat. "You damn fool," I whispered. The wall behind me shuddered from another explosion. Dust rained from the ceiling. I turned back to the screen. Upload 91%. Through the haze of static, new windows began flashing, open news outlets, encrypted government feeds, digital leaks firing across servers worldwide. Grace's files, her research, her evidence, her confessions streamed into the world like veins of light breaking through the dark. Then a message appeared across the center of the screen, global transmission active. Remote trace engaged. They knew what I'd done. Boots thundered closer. The door rattled. "Adam Coleman," a voice barked. "Shut it down now or we shoot." I turned the screen toward them, voice shaking but loud enough to echo. "You can kill me, but you can't kill what she built." They didn't hesitate. The door blasted inward, smoke and shouting pouring through. I dropped behind a cabinet as bullets tore into the walls. Sparks flew. The generator screamed. Upload 99%. A flashbang detonated. My ears rang. Time slowed. Through the smoke I saw Marcus bleeding, crawling toward the entrance, one arm dragging uselessly. His eyes found mine. He mouthed, "Do it. 100%. Transmission complete." The laptop chimed once, clear and soft, like a bell in the middle of chaos. Then the power flickered and died. The soldiers stormed in, rifles up. I raised my hands, coughing through smoke. The laptop sat between us, still glowing faintly as data streamed into the world beyond their reach. One of them stepped forward, visor reflecting the blue light. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed. I looked past him at Marcus lying still near the tunnel mouth, the faintest hint of a smile frozen on his lips. Then I looked at the laptop. Grace's photo filled the screen, her university ID picture, smiling that small, knowing smile. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something close to peace. "I know exactly what I've done," I said. They dragged me to my knees. One soldier shouted for restraints. Another smashed the laptop closed. But it didn't matter. The signal was already gone, bouncing through satellites mirrored on thousands of servers. Grace's truth was free. They could kill the messenger, but not the message. I stared at the cracked concrete floor, the smell of smoke thick in my nose. In the flicker of flashlight beams, I saw a small silver pendant lying near Marcus's body, the chain he always wore. I whispered a silent thank you to the man who'd started as a spy and died as a friend. The commander stepped closer. "Why, Mr. Coleman? You could have walked away." I lifted my head, met his eyes. "Because she didn't die hiding the truth. She died trying to tell it." For a second, even the storm outside seemed to pause. They hauled me out through the tunnel, wrists bound, mud clinging to my boots. The air outside reeked of jet fuel and rain. Helicopters hovered above searchlights, sweeping the forest like angry ghosts. As they pushed me toward a waiting van, I glanced up at the clouds, half expecting to hear her voice in the wind. Instead, I saw lightning white, clean and merciless, cutting through the sky. And I realized something then. Grace hadn't just given me life. She'd given me purpose. Maybe they'd bury me too in some unmarked file or forgotten cell. But out there somewhere, her story was already rewriting itself into history bigger than both of us, louder than any secret. The truth had finally found its way home. When the world woke up, it already knew. By sunrise, every major news network in the country had broken the story. Whistleblower exposes genetic experimentation program linked to Pantera Pharmaceuticals. My name was everywhere, spelled right, spelled wrong, paired with words like hero, traitor, terrorist, turned truth teller. The truth didn't care about spelling. The footage Grace had gathered, the data I'd released, it was all out now. The videos, the falsified reports, the internal memos. It painted a picture no one could deny: decades of human testing, hidden deaths, entire families erased to protect a miracle that was never meant to be sold. The government disavowed the program within hours. Pantera's stock collapsed before noon. The board of directors resigned one by one, all under investigation. And me, I was sitting in a holding cell at Richmond County Jail watching the headlines scroll across a muted TV bolted to the wall. They called me the reluctant whistleblower. I liked that. It made me sound braver than I felt. The feds questioned me for 2 days straight. They wanted to know how I'd accessed the files who'd helped me, what else Grace had hidden. I told them the same thing every time she did all the work. I just pushed a button. They didn't believe me. They rarely do when the truth is that simple. But once the evidence hit international channels, they couldn't bury it anymore. There was nothing left to suppress. The world had already taken what it needed. By the third morning, they let me go. The officer who walked me out, a young woman with tired eyes, paused at the door and said softly, "For what it's worth, my dad worked at Pantera too. Thank you for what you did." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Outside, the air was cold and clear. The rain had finally stopped. The sun rose over the Virginia hills like something reborn, lighting up a sky that had spent too long in shadow. Naomi was waiting for me by her car, my daughter. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She looked so much like her mother it hurt. She didn't speak at first, just walked up and wrapped her arms around me. And for the first time in months, I didn't pull away. We drove back to the house, our house, the one Grace had filled with books and half-finished projects and the smell of old paper. The porch still creaked in the same spot. The coffee pot still whistled if you left it too long. Some ghosts refused to leave politely. Naomi followed me into the kitchen carrying a small envelope in her hand. The edges were worn soft, the handwriting unmistakable. "She left this for me," Naomi said quietly. "Dr. Porter mailed it after the news broke. Said Mom wanted me to read it when the truth finally came out." She opened it carefully, her hands shaking just a little. The letter was short, written in Grace's neat, looping script: "My darling Naomi. If you are reading this, then you finally know what your father and I tried to protect you from. You were never meant to carry the weight of our choices. If I had one more day, I'd tell your father that secrets don't destroy love. Fear does. I hope you both find a way to forgive me for what I did and for what I couldn't say. Love always, Mom." Naomi read it aloud, her voice cracking halfway through. When she finished, she folded the paper and pressed it to her chest. I couldn't speak, I just nodded because words felt too small. Later, when she'd gone upstairs to rest, I walked out to the porch. The old bench was still there, scarred and splintered, but it held. The morning light stretched across the lawn, touching everything it could reach: the chipped fence, the empty bird feeder, the ring of flowers Grace planted that never seemed to die no matter how harsh the winter got. I sat there watching the sun climb higher, and for the first time in a long time I let myself breathe without guilt. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. The world had gone on turning. It always does. On the horizon, a small flock of birds rose into the air, scattering like black ink across the pale sky. I smiled. Grace used to say birds don't mourn the storm, they just wait for the wind to change. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photo I'd found inside her vault, her and me the day before my surgery. She'd written on the back, "For when you forget why you fought." I looked at her face, the same half-smile she always gave when she knew a truth I didn't yet understand. My voice came out rough but steady. "You didn't die hiding the truth," I said softly. "You died trying to tell it." The sun warmed my hands. Somewhere a car engine hummed on the road below. The world sounded alive again. I leaned back on the bench, feeling the weight of everything: loss, relief, peace, all mixing into something almost tender. Maybe Grace had been right. Love wasn't about keeping someone safe. It was about setting them free, even from their pain. And that morning, sitting in the quiet hum of a new day, I finally set her free. You know, I used to think truth was something clean, something you could hold up to the light and feel proud of. But the truth, it burns. It takes pieces of you with it. Grace once told me love means keeping someone safe. She was wrong. Love means setting them free, even if it breaks you to do it. They call me a hero now, a whistleblower, a survivor. But I'm just a man who finally stopped running from his own ghosts. If you've listened this far, tell me where you are in this story. Because maybe somewhere out there, someone's still fighting the same war I thought was over. And maybe the truth we buried isn't done with any of us yet.